Fantastic to have you here, brother.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we're here to discuss your journey, your road. How did you become Kyle Kushman of cannabis fame?
Well, my mom met my dad back in...
We're not going to start that early, okay?
Okay.
Let's not start with the actual inception.
I thought electronic videotape, it was limitless, like we had a limitless space.
Right.
No, okay.
No, what we want to know, I'm sure there's some aspiring cultivators out there that maybe want to be the Kyle Kushman of their generation. And I'm sure it's just a fun story. So, first off, you weren't born Kyle Kushman.
I was not
became.
born Kyle Kushman. I gave myself that name back in 1991.
All right.
93, somewhere in there. My 90s are hazy. I lose the 90s. I'm good on the 80s and the 2000s. Somewhere in the 90s. I don't know. I guess I just got too happy.
Post Kyle Kushman. So tell you what, take us back to the beginning. How did you get into cannabis cultivation?
That's a good place to start. So I was always pretty much I smoked my first joint when I was 13, and I became a pot dealer when I was 14. So at 14, I decided, you buy an ounce of weed, you sell half of it, you get to smoke the other half for free.
That's how it works.
Right? And then somewhere in my 20s, I was living in New Jersey, and my roommate had a friend who was a pot dealer, and he became my source for quarter pounds of weed, or that I could again sell half of it and smoke half of it for myself. Started moving up the food chain. And it just so happened, it was very, 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 very lucky that this gentleman also had seeds. And one day I moved into a brand new 2-bedroom, 2-bath condominium. And it had a walk-in closet in it. And I invited my friend over, and I toured him around, and as soon as he saw the walk-in closet, he said, knowing that he had seeds, he said, hey, if you let me grow in your closet, I'll split it with you. And I swear at that moment...
The light bulb went off for him.
No, it wasn't. No, at that moment, I had actually never really thought about a marijuana plant, meaning, you could probably name, there's certain plants like you're not sure whether the fruit comes from above the ground, or does the peanut grow below the ground, or is an avocado a tree or a bush, or we don't know all of those things, right? Mm-hmm. So at that moment when he said he was going to grow marijuana in my closet in 1987, 88, 89, it didn't click. No, it didn't click. I mean, it's like you can grow marijuana indoors. It doesn't have to be on a hillside in Colombia. I have no idea. So he literally brought me over a single hydrofarm light and an Emily's Garden, the earliest iteration they had of an all-in-one unit, which was basically a little 2.5-gallon plastic reservoir, which above it sat a tub which was filled with lava rock pearls, and on a timer it would flood the system and drain back down into the bottom.
Self-contained hydroponics.
Right, and so he brought this over to my house with some seeds, or I can't even remember if he maybe brought me a couple of plants, I really can't remember. But he brought me 2 little tubs of A and B, 2 powders. It was the grow powder and the bloom powder, right?
Sure.
And some little pH test strips that you dip in and you match the color on the chart. Right, and some droppers to raise the pH up and down.
Your first little grow kit.
And he said you put a gallon of the blue powder during the veg, and you put a teaspoon per gallon of this during the grow, and then when you change the light cycle, we're gonna put a teaspoon of this in, and it sounds really easy. And it turns out it was really easy. The first bud that I grew was about the size of that glass on your table. It was the size of a soda can. The first bud, the finished bud.
Fantastic.
And it had more than one on there. I mean, there was a bunch on there.
Yeah.
But it was this big. And that was when I looked at it and my mind said, son, your life's never gonna be the same. That was an aha moment.
Sure. And it's just so exciting when that first crop comes in and you realize from this little stone or from this plant, you could actually grow something. Like when first time I grew, I was just blown away. I just wanted, this is actually going to get me high. That was just the first thing. Did I just grow something, you know, myself that's really going to get me high,
It
like the
got me
stuff I've been
higher
buying all
than
these years?
I had ever been in my entire life. Of course, part of that was just the self-satisfaction. It didn't matter, but it was also that it was really, really good. It was, you know, it was like anything else that you make with your own hands. It's going to be a measure better than if you go buy it.
Yeah. So you grew this. You had your aha moment.
So I became I became this person who slowly bought some equipment. Of course, the first thing I went out and did was buy Ed Rosenthal and Mel Frank's Grower's Guide.
Good call.
Indoor Grower's Handbook.
Yes.
Read those front to back. Got myself a subscription to High Times magazine. Started collecting those in binders.
Yeah. You still have them?
I have a friend back in New York who has my collection. I think that they're a little moth-ridden by now.
Right.
It's really sad.
But I interrupted. So you started collecting High Times.
I started collecting High Times, reading it from front to back. It was my Bible, the Ed Rosenthal Ask Ed section. I went in full tilt. I took the seeds that were given me that turned out being on the Kyle's Special Blend poster that people were buying all over the world for about a decade. Kyle's Special Blend, it was Northern Lights number 5 crossed with Hash Plant. I can't even remember the cross.
Who made a poster?
Well, a good friend of mine, Andre Grossman, who was a photographer for High Times, he did all the photography for me at the time. He actually, a Dutch company bought this picture from him. And it actually later, and they made a poster, and so it was in every head shop, literally, like in America and around the world for about 4 or 5 years. Kyle's Special Blend, and it had a typo in it. It actually had 2 typos in it that I only know it had 1.
Okay.
I found out about the second 10 years in. The first typo was it was crossed with a hash plant,
Okay.
but it said hash pipe. The other one was cannabis was spelled with 1 N.
Okay.
And it's hilarious because it was the translation from English to Dutch. They didn't translate it properly when they first wrote the caption on the top of the thing.
How about that?
And so soon began an 8-year portion of my life where I basically moved and assumed an alias every 6 to 9 months. So for 8 years, I moved about 15 times.
What part of the country were you living in?
New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania.
This is Northeast.
Yeah.
Early 90s.
This is 80s, late 80s into the mid 90s. I got my job at High Times in 99. And this is back in the days when every year in the 80s, 60 Minutes, 2020, they did a story about the underground indoor grower. And they would find somebody in some Ohio neighborhood with a basement, some mom and pop who were growing.
You don't want Morty Schaefer knocking on your door.
Right,
That's a bad sign.
That was based all those years. I'd see that, and that's what I was doing. And I was building up my knowledge, and then I began dabbling in breeding, and.
So you got hired at High Times. Tell us that story. How does that happen?
So, the initial meeting of High Times is a little bit foggy. I remember my initial meeting of High Times was when I was about 14, and my friend Andy Bensky took me to meet his friend at High Times, and we bought some weed on the street and took it up to High Times for them to smoke. But that wasn't when I met. When I met High Times, someone introduced me to somebody up there because I had really good weed.
Sure.
And I became basically the staff High Times dealer. And every time I harvested, I would travel into the city with a backpack of a couple of pounds of weed, and the receptionist would get on the phone in the intercom and say, "The Kush Man's here, the Kush Man's here. Meet in the advertising office." And everybody would come in and they'd get some meds for their head.
Kush Man.
You know, the Kush, and that's where the name came from. So a few years later,
and excited people would come running.
After I had written an online column for a couple of years, which was offered to me by the then publisher John Holmstrom, he offered me a column online. That's when a staff position, a staff journalist position, opened up, and they offered me a writer's position.
Their respect for the product that you had been growing and providing to them.
And the
led to this?
compendium of answers that I had provided over about 3 years for the internet, for their new website.
Sure.
We're starting a website. Would you like to be part of it? Imagine that, kids. We're starting a website with this new thing called the internet.
Well, that's how it was. That
Right?
was the reality.
And John Holmstrom used to mail me a floppy disk every month in the mail because I didn't even have internet service. And I would put it in my floppy disk word processor, and I would answer a dozen questions, and I would mail it back to him, and they would edit it and put it on their website.
How about that?
And I accumulated hundreds of questions, and that's what got me my job at High Times.
Now you had now not shortly thereafter, you took a trip to Amsterdam, and you
Yeah.
told me this was kind of your official coming out.
Right, my debutante's ball.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's take a quick puff here, and
Boy, does this take me back. The year is 1999.
oh, in the old man voice.
And they had just hired me to be the cultivation reporter. I wasn't qualified to be an editor. I was the cultivation reporter.
Okay.
And they said, Kyle, you want to go to Amsterdam this year? Sure, I'll go to Amsterdam this year. Cool, everybody goes to Amsterdam has a job. You know, some people run the Cannabis Cup, some people do the music, some people do the party at the Melkweg, some people run the expo. What are you going to do?
And when they say come to Amsterdam this year, they mean we're doing the Cannabis
We're doing
Cup.
the Cannabis Cup in Amsterdam,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
This was like the 10th, 11th, maybe 12th.
It's in full swing at that
Cannabis
point.
Cup. Yeah,
It's-
it was
I mean,
in full swing, but it was still pretty young. Actually, it might have even been 7 or 8. These numbers, it's hard to remember back then. I'm an old guy now. You know, I'm 51 now.
So everybody needs a job.
So they said, how about you do a panel? We're going to do a panel with a couple of cultivators from Amsterdam. Would you like to do a panel? Sure, I can do that. So it turns out they put me on a panel with the two most prestigious cultivators in all of Amsterdam. Arjen of the Greenhouse
Yes.
and Wernard of Positronics.
Yeah.
And so it was newly named Kyle Kushman, organic, or as they said, bio farmer, debating these seasoned hydroponic cultivators. And basically it became known as the Great Bio versus Hydro Debate. And it became a story that they printed through the centerfold in High Times, and it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. The one highlight I remember is I started off in a different tense. When I started off the talk, this was a long time ago, I was in hiding. I didn't even want anybody to know my real name. And I started off saying, well, when I used to grow, I would do this. And then somewhere halfway through the talk, I dropped the past tense. And some
Yikes.
heckler out in the audience went, I thought it was something you used to do.
Love it.
And I got a little red and embarrassed. And,
Hey, thanks, buddy.
right, you know, thanks for reminding me that I'm fucking
Oh,
up.
yeah.
You know, so, and you know, that was my first trip to Amsterdam.
That's great. And so from there, you come back, you continue to work at High Times for how many years? You ultimately get promoted to.
Well, there was, I never really qualified the qualifications to be called an editor. I did.
Okay.
I was always the cultivation reporter.
Okay.
I helped make the Stash Awards famous. Chris Simonek coined the phrase Stash, significant technological achievements in Sensimelia horticulture, the Stash Awards. And because my niche was, I started calling around to all the wholesalers, the distributors, all the product companies, and having them send me gear. And then, because I couldn't grow anymore, I started giving the gear to all my friends and living vicariously through them. They loved free gear, and that way I could identify the products that really worked, and that helped build my base of knowledge and also my reputation in the community, for sincere, helpfulness, let's just say.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's fantastic.
So I spent 5 years as a staff journalist, living in Brooklyn, working in Manhattan, driving my little 50cc scooter over the Brooklyn Bridge in the winter,
Yeah.
Yeah, because I didn't want to get in the subway.
So bring us current.
Current. So around 2004, I moved out to California, started Karma Consulting.
Mm-hmm.
It's always a good day to grow. Karma Consulting. Started
Love
doing
it.
a lot of pro bono, just building rooms and teaching people up north that they could, you live in California. You should be growing your own. You got to at least try. And that was really fulfilling. And watching us turn from an illegal counterculture to a legal, commercial, and recreational industry. That's really...
It's exciting times. And
it's scary. Change is scary. Change is usually painful.
Yeah.
And it is a little painful.
Yeah.
Some people are going through it with flying colors and everything, but you know, I'm feeling it out, and I'm building slowly. And I'm reaching for the stars, but I'm trying to accumulate that experience slowly.
I think the difference between, you know, when you had your coming out, you know, 15 or so years ago, coming up on 20 years ago, right?
30.
30 years ago.
I grew my first garden in 1987.
When you had your coming out, so to speak, you had to come up with a pseudonym.
Right.
You had to become Kyle Kushman.
Right.
Me, coming out in this new era that we're living in, I get to come out as Derek Gilman. And I think that's one of the differences, you know, between the different eras in which kind of...
It's so profound. I mean, I work with young people that I teach everything from how to grow to how to trim, manicure, to how to dry and cure, to how to package, to how to all this stuff. And I just was looking at one of my coworkers. It happened to be a woman, a young woman, and she's in there merrily packing up pounds, weighing up pounds, you know, for sale, for distribution, whatever you call it. I don't know what the proper term is, so
Today.
that the licensees don't get mad at you for calling it this. And I just looked into the room, and I said, you know, I said, I've been seeing people do this for a lot of years, but this is the first time I'm looking at somebody who has no concept or fear that there's going to be or it's not even a knock like that, it's usually, you know, and then boom, there's just no concept of that. And it just made me smile. And I said that to the store, and she's like, yeah, isn't it great? And so, yeah, it is great, you know, because we've been doing all of this stuff all these years, from myself, the grower, who presumably makes money doing it, presumably, okay, because that's not always why we do it. I'm not being facetious here. Down to the people whom we pay or compensate to trim the bud, who are putting themselves into that illegal atmosphere.
Yeah.
It's all changed.
I know.
All these people now get to smile and be happy and decide what they want to do with their lives, and not worry that they're going to come home from a day of trimming or not come home from a day of trimming.
So, so to wrap this all up, is there any advice you think you could give to the up-and-coming grower?
Man, you are what you eat, so stay away from phosphoload and all of this carcinogenic, petrochemically derived bud enhancers. And look, I'm not a 100% organic guy. I eat mostly organic, you know. So just stick with that, you know. If everybody's different, just try to feel good about what you grow. Don't look at it as McDonald's. Even if you eat McDonald's, you don't eat it every day. God, hope you don't.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to remember that what you cultivate is going to be consumed by you or others, and so do it in the most conscientious way. Okay, with that in mind.
Yeah, it's got to make you feel good. It's got to make me feel good. I don't do things unless they make me feel good. You know what? I joke, I'm the most selfish person you're ever going to meet. You know why? Because I do good things because they make me feel good.
Yep.
You know why I do that? Because when I was younger, I learned that when I do bad things, it makes me feel bad. I don't like to feel bad. And that includes cultivating and passing along cannabis to other people that I can't feel good about.
Sure.
And that's just me. And I hope you feel the same way.
And on that note, thanks for joining us on The Grower's Quest.
Peace out.
Thanks, Kyle. Great having you, brother.
Thank you. That was perfect.